Hey, it's the Building Outdoor Communities Program Outdoor Economic Impact Toolkit, video number 4. And your narrator is John Whitehead. So, where are we? Oh, number 4, travel cost method. And the text for these videos is Recreation Economic Decisions, Comparing Benefits and Cost. And thanks to the first author, John Loomis, for sharing his PDFs with us. So I'm going to be covering pages 135 to 138, 148 to 151, and then 152 to 156 in chapter 9. And I'm bouncing around because there's several ways of implementing the travel cost method, and I want to focus on just a couple of them. So the travel cost method, this is based on the demand curve. And we're going to use the travel cost to get to a recreation site to proxy for, to measure for the price of a recreation trip. So the idea is that the number of trips to a recreation site will decrease with increases in the price of the trip. And the price of the trip increases with distance traveled because travel costs increase with distance traveled. And so what we want to do is collect data on trips to a recreation site or sites, multiple, and distance traveled. And then we can statistically estimate a demand curve from these data. And with that demand curve, we can use that to estimate consumer surplus of a trip, or the net willingness to pay of a trip. And the two travel cost method approaches we're going to be using are both individual observation based, which means we collect data from individuals who participate in recreation. And sometimes we collect data from individuals who don't participate in recreation to get some information on that participation decision. But anyway, and so we'll do this for a single site and for multiple sites. Okay, the single site individual observation travel cost method. And what we do after we collect these data, we can estimate this demand function with what's known as a regression equation. This is just the statistical approach that we'll use. Okay, so what we say is we run a regression equation with annual trips as the dependent variable and travel cost and other variables as the independent variables. And figure 9.3 in the textbook, which I actually asked you to skip those pages, but here's the picture. Okay, we can estimate the relationship between travel cost and total trips per year. And then the area underneath this demand function, this demand curve, above the price is the consumer surplus or the net willingness to pay, the economic benefit number that you'd use for benefit cost analysis. Okay, and the statistical estimation of this demand curve is described in chapter 6. And the PDF is available, and I will cover this in a bonus video after we plow through the basics of the economics of outdoor recreation. Okay, so it's not as easy as it sounds just to run this regression model, estimate this regression equation. There's some assumptions that are made, and the demand equation is only as good as these assumptions. So where the data deviates from these assumptions, you need to make adjustments or clarifications or do some other things so that the demand function that you estimate will be useful for you. So the two assumptions are that we're looking at single destination and single purpose trips, and that the recreationist doesn't get any benefit from travel time. Okay, in terms of the first assumption, if the trips have multiple destinations or multiple purposes, then the demand function will overstate the benefits of the recreation site. Okay, so let's say you take off from your home and you have two destinations, destination A and destination B. Okay, so if you estimate a demand function for destination B and attribute all of the benefit to destination B, then you're missing the benefits that the recreation gets from destination A. Okay, and the same thing with multiple purposes. If there's a ton of things to do at destination B, the person can go mountain biking, hiking, and also can go shopping and to a ball game. Then if you attribute all of the benefit of the trip to outdoor recreation, you're overstating those benefits. Okay, so some potential solutions: collect data on other destinations and whether the single site recreation was the primary purpose of the trip. You can drop the multiple destination and multiple purpose trip data and estimate only single destination, single purpose, estimate the demand curve with only single destination, single purpose trips. Or you can divide the trip cost among the destinations or purposes. Okay, in terms of no benefits from travel time, if let's say that you go from your home to destination B, and along the way, you get a kick out of looking out your window and noticing pretty scenery. So that's a benefit of the drive. Okay, so the travel cost method assumes that the drive itself is a cost. So if that's not the case, then the travel costs themselves provide two benefits to the travel itself, and the benefit of the on-site recreation. Okay, so in terms of solutions, you could again exclude observations that maybe spend less time on site relative to travel time. So if someone's taken 4 hours to get to a recreation site and only spend 1 hour there, then you might think that there's more benefits to travel time. And the way you identify that is to ask the person the question, well, how much time did you spend on site? And then you'll know from travel distance how much time they spend in travel. And you can also ask the visitors, just straight up ask them if sightseeing was an important part of the trip. And the good news is this is typically not a big problem for recreation sites that are visited frequently. So the idea there is if you drive someplace several times a year, you know what you can see outside the window, and so the travel time is probably more of a cost. And then there's a couple of necessary conditions so that the travel cost method estimates an accurate demand curve. You need sufficient variation in travel cost, and you need to include all of the important variables in the model. Okay, so in terms of sufficient variation, if there's not much variation, then you only have a limited number of data points on the demand function, and you need variation in those travel costs to be able to piece together the data points so that you can draw that downward sloping demand curve. Okay, and if there is little variation, and so imagine that there is a city park that you'd like to estimate the benefits for, and pretty much everyone that goes to the city park is from the city. So everyone lives about the same distance away from the park. Okay, so in that case, you might need to use something called the contingent valuation method, which we will talk about in video number 5. Okay, and inclusion of all important variables in the model. A couple that are important in terms of economic theory are prices of substitute recreation sites and income. Okay, but probably the most important is prices of substitute recreation sites, and because this variable is correlated with the price of the recreation site that you're gathering data on. So since it's correlated, if you do not include this substitute site variable, then the travel cost to the recreation site you're focused on, that slope could be biased. And if it's biased, if it's too steep or too flat, then you're going to estimate you're going to develop a biased estimate of consumer surplus. And then the second type of model that we will employ is the multiple site individual observation travel cost method. And here we're going to combine visitation data from multiple sites that have different levels of recreational site quality or infrastructure. Okay, and in that way we can estimate the value of these differences. Okay, so just imagine that you are looking at a single site model. You have single site data. Okay, and so when you collect your data, there is no variation in site quality across just one recreation site. So if you can collect data on multiple sites, you can estimate different demand curves for those different sites. And so here in figure 9.4 in the book, we've got demand with a current quality that has a vertical intercept of about $21 and a horizontal intercept of 35,000 trips. And then the demand curve with improved quality, let's say we have more miles of mountain bike trail or more miles of hiking trail, or the hiking trails have better scenery, then for every travel cost, say $15, people will want to take more trips to the recreation site that has higher quality. And so when you can account for that statistically, you'll estimate a new demand curve. And here we have it has a vertical intercept of about 27.5 and a horizontal intercept of 48,780. And then since the economic benefit or consumer surplus or net willingness to pay is the area underneath these demand curves above the travel cost, then the difference in these two curves is the gain in consumer surplus from that quality improvement. Okay, and when you collect multiple site individual observation data, you still have to worry about the assumptions. Okay, so in terms of multiple site, for each individual site in that multiple site data, there should be single destination, single purpose trips. If not, you need to adjust your analysis in some way. And we're going to assume there's no benefits from travel time. And in terms of necessary conditions, we still need to have sufficient variation in travel cost and include all important variables in the model.